the amendment came through. There's still some talk about maybe separating Visit Florida from Enterprise Florida. Is that something that you consider, or do you think still keeping everything as one?
Well, listen, they both need to be addressed in the fashion that we talked about today. So whether they travel as one vehicle or two, I think is a question that we'll have to talk about within the body. But they need to be addressed, and so it wouldn't change how we approach Enterprise Florida to eliminate those programs that need to be eliminated while retaining Visit Florida with the constraints we placed on it today.
Do you see any other additional changes or tweaks being made to what's being proposed with Visit Florida?
With respect to Visit Florida, I think,
based on what you heard today.
Yeah, I think the constraints that we've placed on there are proper, and I don't see, with the exception of the meaningful match that I talked about, where we need to develop a good definition of that. I think you will see that piece come in as an additional measure of accountability, but I don't think you're going to see any weakening of those measures.
And what about with Enterprise Florida? You see, is there any chance for something like this, for like Visit Florida, to be brought forward with Enterprise? With Visit Florida, you come up with these
You mean
changes.
to do the same thing with Enterprise Florida? I think the analysis is different. I think with Enterprise Florida, it is fundamentally a question of a misallocation of taxpayer money we're taking from everyone to give to a privileged few, and it's just wrong. I mean, that's the first point that was made today. The second point is it's not the best way to do economic development. We're not against jobs, we're for jobs, but we want to make sure we're allocating those resources. That $200 million needs to be allocated towards broad-based tax reform, getting the big things right, the real factors that attract businesses to Florida. And my point about a permanent incentive is when you do that, we're already well on the way. Jobs and capital is coming to the state of Florida because we have that good business climate, not because of Enterprise Florida. I mean, you'd hear the discussion today, it's almost as if all the jobs are going to go away if the government doesn't continue to actively intervene in the markets, and that's not who creates wealth. The private sector creates wealth, and so by creating the lowest possible tax structure and the most reasonable regulatory structure consistent with health and safety, we make Florida an irresistible place to do business and a permanent incentive so that the jobs don't go away when the government subsidies go away.
Now, Cruz made comment about 25 is not the final back on Visit Florida. 25 million is not the final. Do you see that being a negotiating point or something?
I didn't say that. I mean, again,
that's what I said. It was,
I think you go back to where they were historically for many, many years. And as I said before, the problems began when the funding started to skyrocket. And so, like anyone else, that's on probation, they need to prove up that within the new measures of accountability that they can wisely spend a large sum of money. This is taxpayer money, $25 million. The average state spend on tourism is about $20 million, so we're above the average. And when they can show that they can meaningfully manage that amount of money and do so in a way that shows some results, then they can come back and ask for more. If they fail to do that, we may give them less.
Do you still have one more committee for this, or is this?
We'll have to see what the next stop is.
And then obviously the Senate, that came out today, I think that ballot today was basically coming out fully endorsing incentives and Visit Florida. Where do you see this whole thing clashing the other side and then with Scott?
It's a process, and so the Senate will give us their feedback. I think there's already bills that are in the works on Visit Florida and Enterprise Florida. Those will merge at some point, and we'll see where we are. But I think our position's a really strong one and a good one, and we are where we need to be.
What about with the Joe Gruder bill? He's also got the reform for EFI.
Yeah, I mean, it's great to offer some accountability measures, but I don't think it goes far enough. And I applaud him for joining the conversation, but we think that the accountability measures we have in this bill are necessary given what's happened in the past, and it will help them be more successful if they can provide some benefit to Florida.
If you cut 2/3 of the funding for Visit Florida, are you not cutting potentially 2/3 of the revenue that we're generating, as Ken Lawson was pointing out?
There's a couple problems with ROI. One of the accountability measures is right now EDR doesn't get an independent analysis of the raw data. Okay, and so that's important because for her to be able to give an accurate ROI, she needs the back-end data to know, are we double counting tourists? How much of Visit Florida's effort is really to be given credit for the increase in tourism. They represent a small fraction of the overall spend, and so you're talking about 8-10% of the overall spend, and of course that would include the $25 million now we've funded back in this bill. And so, and as you know, in Tallahassee, the sky is always falling with any bill that's a first line of defense, and that's just simply not going to happen.
You don't think there will be any revenue drop whatsoever if you cut marketing?
I don't think the sky is going to fall between $25 and $75 million. This is an adequate amount. The question is, how much were they wasting before? And so $25 million well spent is better than $75 million poorly spent.
Now, and clearly, deals like the pit bull deal, the race car, the soccer team, you put all that together, it's not $50 million. Is there a lot more waste in Visit Florida that's problematic for you than just those three items?
Those are the items we've cited too. We've talked about some other governance issues where contracts have been sent to a former head of Visit Florida. These kinds of things cause all taxpayers to say, hey, wait a minute, what's going on? Because it looks like self-dealing. So those kinds of things just need to be cleaned up. And again, when they can show that they can have measurable success and do so with a greater amount of funding and that's justified, they can certainly come back and ask for it, knowing that the challenge is if they fail to do that, there may be less funding.
Why not just cut back like the 9 or 10 million that went to things like that, and let them keep doing the other marketing that it hasn't been as criticized.
The governor is where he is with full funding, and I don't know where the Senate will be during the budget process, but this will get worked out during the budgetary process, and it is a process of give and take, and whether everyone comes to our position or we move a little bit towards their position, time will tell, but we think this is a fair place to start given the problems. And as I said, if you have someone who's irresponsibly spending money, what you don't do is raise their credit limit. And you're lucky that you didn't cut up the credit card. And so we're giving them a large amount of money to do the job that they say they can do with measures of accountability, and we'll see where it goes from there.
And the thing I keep pointing out, this bill is dead. It's like it can't get through the Senate unless there's a companion bill. And then even if you got it through both of them as is, you're asking the governor to have a chance to veto the bill. There's no chance this bill can take place. So why all this effort to go through this exercise? Is this just a philosophical, exploration of ideas, or is this a legitimate chance to do some legislation?
I disagree with that premise, because you heard today from DEO, and you heard, I believe, from Visit Florida as well, but I know from DEO, the specific question from the chair, do you support the accountability piece of the Visit Florida changes? And the answer was yes. And so, to your question, we are making progress. Because of this bill, we have already made progress, and where they've come to our position with respect to the accountability measures for Visit Florida. If not the funding, they've come to the accountability provisions, and that's progress. And so we are making progress in that direction.
But didn't they make some of those steps already? When the governor, in December put out his letter, most of the things that are in what you guys are proposing were part of his letter. It's like the very same concepts of accountability are in there.
Well, as you know, there's been a bill, you mentioned it, that's been introduced that does not contain those measures of accountability. We understand that that's with the governor's blessing. So the proof is in the pudding, and there's not a bill that's been filed that does what we do, except the bill that we've advanced.
Okay, so getting it codified in language is what shows the progress. That
a letter doesn't do anything legally to Visit Florida, and so what we've done is put in place some very stringent accountability measures to make sure.
But passing a bill that doesn't pass, the Senate and gets signed by the governor.
Well, my point is that you've already had agreement that those accountability measures are appropriate. So we would expect that the governor at some point will come to our position on those measures, along with the Senate, and that's progress.
But if you
they think they've already
we
done
haven't
that.
even started session.
They
yet.
think they've already done that accountability step.
And you're tying the funding in with codifying it, so doesn't that sort of make it even that much difficult to get it through the Senate and then on Scott's signature?
I don't know whether it makes it more difficult for the Senate or not, but I think it's where we need to be. I think it's where the funding needs to be right now, given the problems that have taken place, and it's adequate funding.
Right. Couldn't you just? That's what I'm saying. Couldn't you just put the changes through as a bill and then separately have the funding, as has been done in the past with the budget?
Sure you could, and we could come in and say $25 million. But I think as the staff director mentioned, this is not a cap. It is essentially providing a measure of funding, and if during budget conference they come to a different position collectively to get a comprehensive package done, then there could be more funding.
Yeah.
Okay.